Y'all, this is what I mean when people do not have intentionality behind their diversity and equity work. I have an organization reach out and ask me to do a keynote presentation about cultural appropriation.
Okay, this story is unbelievable.
So they tell me, yeah, it's actually part of our annual conference. And then I ask, just so I know, what comes before and after my keynote presentation at this conference if I agree to do it? They say you're the very first session, they have coffee hour, and then they have you. And I'm like, yes, give them to me caffeinated. And they say right after you is yoga, and we're really excited about it. That's a yellow flag. That's a pause. I'll tell you why. I ask, what kind of yoga is it? They say hip hop goat yoga. I say, who is instructing this hip hop goat yoga class? I give them screen share privileges so they can show me a very nice looking white woman practicing yoga with a goat on her back. And they are very excited. They are enthusiastically telling me about this hip hop goat yoga, but they can tell from my face that I'm not amused, and their tone changes and they're like, is something wrong?
Okay, so this TikTok by Victoria Alexander points out something that is really pervasive in society, especially with like big businesses and marketing and things like that. And basically in any type of business environment, you're gonna have people constantly talking about diversity and inclusion and how important that is to the company to create like a positive workplace culture that's accepting and inviting to everybody. But then at the same time, fail to understand what that really means and how to bring that about in reality.
Keep in mind, they have invited me to do a keynote presentation on cultural appropriation. So I'm like, yeah, a couple of things are just a little bit wrong. First of all, yoga is a Hindu practice and hip hop is a Black cultural art form. So I'm not so much loving that they are being conflated and then instructed by an American white woman. And they hear that. And it was like it just washed over them. Like they had not even considered any of the things that I have just shared. And they said they've already contracted with hip hop goat yoga lady and they can't back out, but they would love to have me too. Unfortunately, my values do not align with the goals and values of this program. Thank you so much for thinking of me. And with that, I bid you good day. I said good day.
You see, there's something that's really important to understand here. It is a concept called imaginative labor. Now, imaginative labor is relatively simple. Think about this. Imagine you're in a workplace and you're in a meeting and your boss is there. Whatever you say, you're going to be thinking through the lens of, what is my boss going to think about what I say in this moment? And you will tailor what you say sort of to what your boss thinks. Now, in that relationship, especially if you have a boss that is not great, sometimes you might even fudge the truth significantly in order to not hurt your boss's feelings or to help create an imagined reality that your boss wants to live in about your workplace. Because of that power imbalance, you are forced to imagine the thoughts and feelings of your boss. You are expected to anticipate the needs of your boss. And the reality about the society that we live in today is that in a society that is sexist, that is racist, that has so much cultural norms that are just built into it to support systems of bigotry, this imaginative labor is something that is imposed on marginalized people. Marginalized people are expected to constantly be thinking about the feelings, to anticipate the needs of more privileged people around them, to constantly be thinking about, oh, what will other people think about my action? And this is especially true for Black folks in particular, who are incredibly over-policed in our society, not just literally by the police themselves, but also by other white folks who, for whatever reason, have decided to make it their business to be judging all the Black folks around them. Which, of course, leads to the phenomena that many people call Karenism, that I think you've seen tons of content about already. But so what does this have to do with diversity inclusion? Well, ultimately, the idea of imaginative labor, of thinking about other people's needs, about anticipating other people's needs, and trying to acknowledge how people might be impacted by the things that you say and do, is generally speaking a good thing. It's just a bad thing when it is structurally imposed on some people but not other people, because it allows bigotry to thrive. So when you're thinking about diversity and inclusion, you can think about it isolated in that one context. You can listen to a lecture and even take in all of that information and think to yourself, wow, I'm not racist at all. But if you're not taking that and using that information to later then think about your own actions with regularity, to regularly stop and reflect as to what you're actually doing, the decisions that you're making, and how that might impact people of color, how that might impact marginalized people, people with disability, queer folks, you name it, then you are not actually bringing out those things into practice. You are just doing diversity lectures because you think it makes you feel good, but not putting in any of the effort or work that it actually takes to bring about the material reality that should result from diversity and inclusion training. And that component is really, really critical, because if you're talking about hip hop goat yoga that is led by a white woman from the United States, if you just had a little bit of that imaginative labor in your process, if you built into your process a just stop and think moment of, how would this be perceived by somebody for which yoga is like a big part of their culture and heritage? How would other people receive this? Then you might come to the pretty obvious conclusion that maybe perhaps that's not what you should do in like your business seminar day. But the unfortunate reality is these types of things happen far too frequently, where you will get advertising campaigns that as soon as they run, there will be a million people that point out how obviously racist it is. And it just goes to show that while many businesses will claim to prioritize diversity and inclusion and acceptance, they're unwilling to even do the basic, most bare minimum levels of imaginative labor to think about how people that aren't cis white men might respond to their advertising campaigns or their seminars or anything else that the business does. So if there's one takeaway that you get from this, it's to take any information that you hear about anti-racism and other things like that and try to consider that through the lens of imaginative labor, and try to imagine yourself anticipating the needs of other people before you do anything or say anything. It's one of those things that should just be like a basic human decency thing, but unfortunately, because of the culture and the society that we live in, privileged people are in general not really expected or even encouraged to engage in this type of imaginative labor, which is why so many businesses around the country find themselves with their foot in their mouth.